Good morning, boys and girls. We are going to be reading another chapter of Black Beauty today. So if you recall, in our last chapter, we found out that Black Beauty and Ginger had to start wearing those check reins, and it is getting higher and higher and higher and more uncomfortable for the horses. Do you remember what Ginger's reaction was when they shortened it even more? She got very upset and she actually fell over and kicked Black Beauty on accident because she was so uncomfortable and she is very irritable. And Black Beauty found out from another horse named Max that actually these check reins can even shorten a horse's life. So it's not only uncomfortable, it's really bad for them. We're going to start reading a chapter today called The Lady Anne. This is a young lady who is the Earl of W's daughter that we're going to hear about today. So let's begin. I'm going to present my screen. Okay, now early in the spring, Lord W and part of his family went up to London and took York with them. Do you remember who York is? He is the one in charge of the stables. He takes care of the horses. I and Ginger and some other horses were left at home for use, and the head groom was left in charge. Now, the head groom is somebody who works for York, but he is also in charge of other people, kind of like Little Joe Green, those types of people who work at the new stables. Now, the Lady Harriet, who remained at the hall, was a great invalid, meaning she possibly could not walk at all. She maybe is in a wheelchair. And she never went out in the carriage. And the Lady Anne preferred riding on horseback with her brother or cousins. She was a perfect horsewoman, and as gay and gentle as she was beautiful. So, two sisters, there's Harriet and there's Lady Anne. And Lady Harriet, she is disabled. She's an invalid, so she cannot ride the horses. But Lady Anne loves to ride horses. She chose me for her horse and named me Black Auster. So Black Beauty's got a new name according to Lady Anne. I enjoyed these rides very much in the clear, cold air, sometimes with Ginger, sometimes with Lizzie. Now, this Lizzie was a bright bay mare, almost thoroughbred, and a great favorite with the gentlemen on account of her fine action and lively spirit. Sounds kind of like Ginger, doesn't she? So Lizzie is another female horse who lives at Earl's Hall. But Ginger, who knew more of her than I did, told me she was actually rather nervous. Once again, that also sounds kind of like Ginger. So this Lizzie gets nervous. There was a gentleman of the name of Blantyre staying at the hall. He always rode Lizzie and praised her so much that one day Lady Anne ordered the side saddle to be put on her and the other saddle on me. Side saddles are for ladies to ride, and so the side saddle is going to go on Lizzie instead. Now, who does Lady Anne usually ride? Black Beauty. So she wants to ride Lizzie instead. And what do we know of Lizzie? She's very spirited. She also gets nervous. Now, when we came to the door, the gentleman seemed very uneasy. "How is this?" he said. "Are you tired of your good Black Auster?" She said, "Oh, no, not at all," she replied, "but I am amiable enough to let you ride him for once, and I will try your charming Lizzie." Now, maybe she's doing this with good intention. She also might be a little jealous, and she wants to try out Lizzie. "You must confess that in size and appearance, she is far more like a lady's horse than my own favorite." So that tells us she likes the look of Lizzie because Lizzie looks very gentle and ladylike. And she wants to ride the one that seems prettier and more ladylike. "Do let me advise you not to mount her," he said. "She is a charming creature, but she is too nervous for a lady." So he's saying, don't ride Lizzie. She's not a good horse for a lady to ride because she gets nervous. And a nervous horse might get frightened of things around them. And then imagine riding on a horse that's jumping around and getting scared. That's not good for the person riding, especially with ladies riding side saddle. It's harder to stay up. "I assure you," he says, "she is not perfectly safe. Let me beg you to have the saddles changed." My dear cousin, said Lady Anne, laughing, pray do not trouble your good careful head about me. I have been a horsewoman ever since I was a baby, and I have followed the hounds a great many times. Though I know you do not approve of ladies hunting. But still, that is the fact, and I intend to try this Lizzie that you gentlemen are all so fond of. So please help me to mount like a good friend as you are. She did not listen to that advice. We'll see what happens. Now, there was no more to be said. He placed her carefully on the saddle, looked to the bit and curb, gave the reins gently into her hand, and then mounted me. Just as we were moving off, a footman came out with a slip of paper and a message from Lady Harriet. Would they ask this question for her at Dr. Ashley's and bring the answer? The village was about a mile off, and the doctor's house was the last in it. We went along gaily enough till we came to his gate. There was a short drive up to the house between tall evergreens. Blantyre alighted at the gate and was going to open it for Lady Anne. Alighted, by the way, means he got off of Black Beauty. And he was going to open up the gate for Lady Anne, but she said, I will just wait for you here. And you can hang osters. Remember, that's Black Beauty. So Blantyre, he's going to go into town, leaving Black Beauty tied up to the fence. And Lady Anne is just riding Lizzie, waiting for him as he goes to send that note to a doctor. He looked at her doubtfully. Okay, I will not be gone for 5 minutes, he said. Oh, do not hurry yourself. Lizzie and I shall not run away from you, she says. Now he hung my rein on one of the iron spikes and was soon hidden among the trees. Lizzie was standing quietly by the side of the road a few paces off, with her back to me. My young mistress was sitting easily with a loose rein, humming a little song. I listened to my rider's footsteps until they reached the house and heard him knock at the door. There was a meadow on the opposite side of the road, the gate of which stood open. Just then, some cart horses and several young colts came trotting out in a very disorderly manner. So they are not reined up, they're probably loose as they're just running out. The colts were wild and frolicsome, and one of them bolted across the road and blundered up against Lizzie's hind legs. So he ran into Lizzie. And whether it was the stupid colt or the loud cracking of the whip, or maybe both together, I cannot say, but she, Lizzie, gave a violent kick and dashed off into a headlong gallop. So with Lady Anne still on top, Lizzie is running furiously. Now we know she is a nervous horse, so who knows what's going to happen, but she is scared and she's running and probably not paying attention to what Lady Anne actually wants her to do. It was so sudden that Lady Anne was nearly unseated, but she soon recovered herself. I gave a loud shrill neigh for help. Again and again I neighed, pawing the ground impatiently. Black Beauty's trying to send a message to Blantyre to come. And tossing my head to get the rein loose, I had not long to wait. Blantyre came running to the gate. He looked anxiously about and just caught sight of the flying figure, not literally flying, but running so fast, Lizzie and Lady Anne on top of her, now far away on the road. In an instant, he sprang to the saddle. I needed no whip, no spur. Just like that night going to the doctor, right? Black Beauty knows when something is an emergency. For I was just as eager as my rider. He saw it, and giving me a free rein and leaning a little forward, we dashed after them. For about 1.5 miles, the road ran straight, and then bent a little to the right, after which it divided into 2 roads. Long before we came to the bend, she was out of sight. Which way had she turned? Ways, and he cannot see far enough to see which one Lizzie ran down. A woman was standing at her garden gate, shading her eyes with her hand and looking eagerly up the road. Scarcely drawing the rein, Blantyre shouted, "Which way?" "To the right," cried the woman, pointing with her hand, and away we went up the right-hand road. Then, for a moment, we caught sight of her. Another bend, and she was hidden again. Several times we caught glimpses, and then lost them. We scarcely seemed to gain ground upon them at all. An old road mender was standing near a heap of stones, his shovel dropped and his hands raised. As we came near, he made a sign to speak. Blantyre drew the rein just a little. To the common, sir, she's turned off there. I knew this common very well. It was for the most part very uneven ground. It's covered with heather and dark green furze bushes, with here and there a scrubby old thorn tree. So instead of it being a paved out road, this is a really rough area. And if you're a person riding a horse on a rough area, it's bumpy. There were also open spaces of fine short grass with anthills and mole turns everywhere. Now, if there are anthills and mole turns, that means it's bumpy once again. Could be that the horse stumbles in one of those. The worst place I ever knew for a headlong gallop, Black Beauty says. It is dangerous for a horse to be running furiously through a place that's bumpy and uneven. We had hardly turned on the common when we caught sight again of the green habit flying on before us. My lady's hat was gone, and her long brown hair was streaming behind her. Her head and body were thrown back as if she were pulling with all her remaining strength, and as if that strength was nearly exhausted. It was clear that the roughness of the ground had very much lessened Lizzie's speed, and there seemed a chance that we might overtake her, which means to catch up with her. While we were on the high road, Blantyre had given me my head. Meaning he dropped the reins so that Black Beauty could really surge ahead. But now, with a light hand and a practiced eye, he guided me over the ground in such a masterly manner that my pace was scarcely slackened. So Black Beauty's going really fast because he's being guided around the holes in the rough areas. And we were decidedly gaining on them. About halfway across the heath, there had been a wide dike recently cut, and the earth from the cutting was cast up roughly on the other side. So a big hole, and the earth is being cut up, the ground is. Now surely this would stop them, you would think. But no, the rough clods and fell. Blantyre groaned. Now, Oster, do your best. They've got to make the jump now too. He gave me a steady rein. I gathered myself well together and with one determined leap, cleared both the dike and the bank. Wow, Black Beauty made that big jump and landed. Motionless among the heather with her face to the earth lay my poor young mistress. So Lizzie fell, and then obviously Lady Anne fell too, since she was still riding her. Blantyre kneeled down and called her name. There was no sound. Gently, he turned her face upward. It was ghastly white, and the eyes were closed. Annie, dear Annie, do speak. But there was no answer. He unbuttoned her habit, that's her overcoat, loosened her collar, felt her hands and her wrists, then started up and looked wildly round him for help. At no great distance, there were two men cutting turf who, seeing Lizzie running wild without a rider, had left their work to catch her. Blantyre's halloo soon brought them to the spot. The foremost man seemed much troubled at the sight and asked what he could do. Can you ride? Well, sir, I ain't much of a horseman, but I'd risk my neck for the Lady Anne. She was uncommon good to my wife in the winter. Then mount this horse, my friend, your neck will be quite safe, and ride to the doctor's and ask him to come instantly. Then on to the hall, tell them all that you know, and bid them send me the carriage, with Lady Anne's maid and help. I shall stay here. All right, sir, I'll do my best, he says, and I pray God the dear young lady may open her eyes soon. Then, seeing the other man, he called out, Here, Joe, run for some water, and tell my missus to come as quick as she can to the Lady Anne. He then somehow scrambled into the saddle, and with a "Gee-up" and a clap on my sides with both his legs, he started on his journey, making a little circuit to avoid the dike. He had no whip, which seemed to trouble him, but my pace soon cured that difficulty, and he found the best thing he could do was to stick to the saddle and hold me in, which he did manfully. I shook him as little as I could help, but once or twice on the rough ground he called out, "Steady! Whoa, steady!" Now, on the high road, we were all right, and at the doctor's in the hall, he did his errand like a good man and true. They asked him in to take a drop of something. "No, no," he said. "I'll be back to him again by a short cut through the fields, and be there afore the carriage." There was a great deal of hurry and excitement after the news became known. I was just turned into my box, the saddle and a cloth thrown over me. Ginger was saddled and sent off in great haste for Lord George, and I soon heard the carriage roll out of the yard. It seemed a long time before Ginger came back and before we were left alone. And then she told me all that she had seen. "I can't tell much," she said. "We went a gallop nearly all the way and got there just as the doctor rode up. There was a woman sitting on the ground with the lady's head in her lap. The doctor poured something into her mouth, but all that I heard was, 'She is not dead.' Thank goodness. So that was a terrible fall, but she is not dead." Then I was led off by a man to a little distance. After a while, she was taken to the carriage, and we came home together. I heard my master say to a gentleman who stopped him to inquire that he hoped no bones were broken, but that she had not spoken yet. When Lord George took Ginger for hunting, York shook his head. He said it ought to be a steady hand to train a horse for the first season, and not a random rider like Lord George. So they think this Lord George is not going to do well with Ginger. Ginger used to like it very much, but sometimes when she came back, I could see that she had been very much strained, and now and then she gave a short cough. She had too much spirit to complain, but I could not help feeling anxious about her. 2 days after the accident, Blantyre paid me a visit. He patted me and praised me very much. He told Lord George that he was sure the horse knew of Annie's danger as well as he did. "I could not have held him in if I would," said he. "She ought never to ride any other horse." I found by their conversation that my young mistress was now out of danger and would soon be able to ride again. This was good news to me, and I looked forward to a happy life. Wow, that was scary to hear of how badly her fall was, and a good lesson for her to understand that there are some horses that it's better not to ride and that it can be very dangerous. But thankfully, she is saved, and she was even able to ride a horse again pretty soon. Okay, well, that's the end of chapter 24. You've got some notes to take over this, and I will talk to you another time. Bye.